The 1994 BPR series was introduced as a way of getting GT racing back on its feet once again. The World Sports Car Series, which proved so strong in the late 80s, certainly died a bit of a death in the early 90s, and many people around the world keen to see sports car racing reach the top of motorsport once again. Well, the organisation that went together to put together GT racing for 1994 was known as the BPR organisation and was put together by Jürgen Barth, Patrick Peter and Stefan Rattel. The three of them coming together to introduce the series, not a championship as such, but a series of individual races which started off at Paul Ricard in France back in March. Well, cars from all over Europe, but particularly the cars from Porsche, Ferrari and Venturi taking part in this series of races. Some well-known names also competing, some from the world of Formula One, some from sports car racing, and some through series like the Venturi Trophy in France. Well, as the first race got underway, it was a Porsche up at the head of the field. In fact, it was the Porsche of Jean-Pierre Jarier, Jesus Pereira and Bob Wollek, which had taken pole position in the qualifying. Three very experienced sports car racers, taking the fastest time in qualifying and taking the early lead in the race as well. In fact, they'd come from a good result already in 1994, having taken the GT success at the Daytona 24-hour race just over a month previously. Well, this factory-supported Porsche 911 certainly was the car to beat in the opening round of the BPR series. Not far behind, the Lotus Esprit, which was leading in the GT3 category, a different class to the leading Porsche overall, and doing very well indeed. The Lotus, which had performed at Le Mans in 1993, and were hoping to do a full season of the BPR series. Into the pits for the race leader then, Jean-Pierre Jarier, waiting to get into the car, jumping in and being helped out of the car, Bob Wollek. Well, 50-year-old Bob Wollek showing that it was fairly hot work out there at Paul Ricard in the early part of the year. The man who won the European Group C Championship back in 1983, thoroughly enjoying his return to sports car racing. Well, further back, Franz Conrad would go on to finish fourth overall. Jacques Lecomte and Dominique Dupuy ended up in third. Second place for Edgar Dorin and Michael Irmgard, but the winners were indeed the number 86 Porsche, the factory-supported car of Jarier, Wollek and Pereira, coming through to take the first win of the 1994 GT Series. And so on to the second round of the championship, held at Jarama in Spain, a very popular circuit with the drivers. And taking pole position for this one, Luciano Della Noce and Anders Olofsson. Olofsson, a very experienced driver with the Ferrari F40, the fastest time in qualifying, with alongside him Michel Ferté and Michel Neugarten's Venturi, with Ferté about to get it underway. The Ferrari of Anders Olofsson leading into the first corner, and this car running as the Labra competition Porsche that won the first round at Paul Ricard, and the Venturi lying in second place in the GT1 category. And off for the Henriksen Bell Porsche 968 into the gravel, but they were able to get going and in fact would finish 8th overall in this race. Up front, Olofsson was coming under a fair bit of pressure, and in fact Michel Ferté was trying to find a way through, as was the Porsche once again of Jarier Pereira, and this time Dominique Dupuy, who'd joined the driving strength, and in fact they went through to take the lead. So once again, the number 86 Porsche was in control of a GT race, chasing after them and putting on quite a lot of pressure, but not enough to get past Michel Trollet in the white Venturi. But it wasn't going to be enough to prevent the second win in succession for the Labra competition car. Michel Ferté and Michel Neugarten in the number 71 car, the Venturi going out of the race and proving to be a little disappointed. Prince Alfonso d'Orléans, the cousin of the King of Spain, in the Repsol Ferrari. But they would go out after nearly 3.5 hours running, the number 34 car of Ray Bell, and Harry Nuttall were still going very well indeed in the GT4 category. And in fact, they were working their way up into second place. So the win once again for Jean-Pierre Jarier, the ex-Grand Prix driver, with Jesus Pereira and Dominique Dupuy in the team this time. But an excellent second place for Harry Nuttall and Ray Bell in their Porsche RSR. Nuttall and Bell on the second slot on the podium, but the win once again going to the Lavre competition Porsche team. So the teams moved on to Dijon, another classic circuit, and hopefully another classic race. Most of the races being held over 4 hours duration. The last race at Jarama, they'd managed to complete 140 laps in the 4 hours, and here at Dijon, much the same was going to happen again. A 4-hour endurance race, 2 or 3 drivers allowed for each car, and the battle on once again between Ferrari, Porsche and Venturi. Venturi, the French specialist car manufacturer, particularly producing very fine sports cars. They've run their own series of Venturi racing in France over the last few years, but really wanting to do battle with the big names in sports cars. The BPR series was beginning to grow in popularity already, and the grids beginning to increase with more and more Porsches turning up, more sports car enthusiasts from around Europe wanting to join in. There were some interested onlookers at Dijon as well, and one of the ones that we spoke to was Gordon Murray, the designer of the McLaren F1 sports car, a car that many people would like to see coming into the world of GT racing. And we took the opportunity to speak to Gordon Murray and ask him about his plans.
Gordon Murray, everyone here at Dijon delighted to see McLaren taking an interest in the GT series. Are you coming in soon?
Well, I'm really here just to have a look, just to come to see how the series is run and get a general feel for the cars, the organisation, and I must say I'm pretty impressed with the atmosphere and the support for the series. I think the decision whether we come in or not is really not up to me alone. There's a board of directors, and we'll see how this develops and see what customer interest we have in racing and make a decision after that.
And so on to the rolling grid at Dijon, the third round of the BPR series in 30 degrees of heat. A lot of hard work for the drivers and hard for the mechanics of the car as well. Taking off into the early lead, Anders Olofsson from that pole position and trying to get the Ferrari to the finish of this 4-hour race. Olofsson taking pole, 1 minute 22.41 had been his fastest time in qualifying, just half a second ahead of the Venturi of Ferdinand de Lesseps. But coming up into second place already was Michel Neugarten in another of the Venturis. Neugarten, an experienced racer in the Venturi Trophy itself in France, as well as other sports car racing himself. Qualifying a little bit further back this time was the Bell-Nuttall car, but once again in their category they would soon start to make their presence felt. The battle for the lead soon developing though, and Olofsson was coming under pressure from Michel Neugarten. Neugarten trying to force a way through, but Anders Olofsson just managing to deny him the opportunity. Olofsson, with so much experience, the 42-year-old Swede who raced touring cars in the European Series, then suddenly going into trouble though, and passed by both Neugarten and a couple of the other Venturis. There were definitely problems for the Ferrari F40 once again of Anders Olofsson, and it wasn't long before he was back in the pits, and the shaking head meant that there was no way that the Ferrari was going to be back out to do battle with the Venturis. But for once it was not a Porsche leading the race, it was indeed the Venturis putting on a tremendous display up front. The number 56 car of Koppeli and Ochik as well, as meanwhile Franz Conrad and Cor Euser found problems with their Porsche that put them out of the race. Venturi looking for their first ever international sports car win. Michel Ferté taking over the car from teammate Michel Neugarten. The car is powered by the Renault V6 engine, pumping around 500 to 600 brake horsepower. Very powerful indeed. And Ferte just hoping that it will last all the way to the end. Oscar Larori in the Ferrari into the pits. A quick tyre change, refuel, and then back out once again for the remainder of the 4-hour race. And jumping into the number 48 car, Prince Alfonso d'Orléans. They would go out later on with a broken gearbox. Meanwhile, Ray Belm and Harry Nuttall again performing very consistently and very quickly, and the Bristow Motorsport team putting in a superb effort in the pits to get the car back out as quickly as possible. Well, the Venturi number 57, the yellow car of De Lesseps and Tropenau, would come through to finish 4th, whilst Ray Belm and Harry Nuttall came through to an excellent 3rd place overall. Number 56 Venturi, the white car of Philippe Olsik and Almo Capelli, finished in 2nd, 2 laps behind the winner, but they wouldn't have been too unhappy about that, because the win went to another Venturi, the first ever international win for Venturi, and it was taken by Michel Ferte and Michel Neugarten. 163 laps completed in the 4 hours, and Venturi's finishing 1st, 2nd and 4th out of the 20 cars that completed the race. A tremendous achievement for the team, and the result that they'd been seeking since the start of the GT series. We spoke to Stefan Rattel, the competition director of Venturi, about the result.
It's been a great day, great day. It's a result of long days, deception sometimes, like in Jarama, a lot of work for the factory, for all the teams which been helping Venturi, and it's really a great day for us, and I hope it's just a beginning.
The team stayed in France for the next round of the BPR series as well, and it was reviving a classic motor race. The 1,000 kilometers of Paris, held at the Montlhéry circuit, a very famous track with bits of banking that go back to the 1920s. Pole position went on this occasion to Michel Ferte, the winner from that last round. Christophe Bouchou 2nd on the grid, with Olchik well up, and Anders Olofsson once again in the Ferrari F40. Well, he qualified 3rd. 4th on the grid indeed was Olchik. And as the race began to get underway following the pace car round at the start of the rolling lap, a very difficult race was in prospect. A very bumpy track. The bit of banking that's used by the cars certainly hasn't been looked after over the years, as well as perhaps some circuits, and all the teams knew that the cars were in for a real pounding during the course of the afternoon. To the start of the race then, and Christophe Bouchou on the right-hand side of the picture in his Venturi, trying to go around the outside of Michel Ferte into the first hairpin. The two Venturis doing battle on the Montlhéry track, and it certainly seemed as though Venturis had well and truly arrived in international competition by this stage in the season. Anders Olofsson wasn't far back in the Ferrari F40, but was having to watch the battling Venturis ahead of him at this point. Ferte just about holding off that attack from Christophe Bouchou, the man who'd won the 1993 Le Mans 24-hour race with Peugeot, and it wasn't long, in fact, before he was able to go through. Bouchou leading Michel Ferte, and the Venturis were looking good, but soon the mechanical problems would begin to befall everybody. The track proving to be very difficult, very demanding on the cars and equipment, and also on the drivers now and then as well. A mistake from number 49, Porsche of Ligonnès, but managing to retrieve it as he comes down off the banking. The high temperatures certainly didn't help, but the rough track surface was beginning to take its toll on the machinery, but going very smoothly indeed and suffering no such problems was the number 43 Venturi, the white car of Henri Pescarolo, the man who'd won his first ever 1,000 kilometers at Montlhéry some 25 years previously. Anders Olofsson was still going well in the Ferrari F40, but unfortunately that was not to last for very much longer. The Lotus of Andreas Fuchs and David Kennedy was running well at this point in the race, But the Ferrari was going into trouble. Smoke appearing from the exhaust pipes of the twin-turbo machine, and he was soon making a very final visit into the pits. So the lead going to Henri Pescarolo and Jean-Claude Bassot. The checkered flag waiting for them, and after 7.5 hours and 294 laps of the Montlhéry track, the win for Henri Pescarolo. An amazing achievement, his first victory since his win in the Daytona 24 Hours in 1991. The four-time winner of Le Mans coming through to victory. Second place, an excellent performance again for Ray Belm and Harry Nuttall in the Bristow Motorsport Porsche RSR. And in third position, Ernst Palmberger, Danny Pell and Detlef Hübner. We'll be back with more from the GTs right after this break. The GT team's next calendar visit was to Italy and Vallelunga, where Anders Olafsson took pole position once again in the Ferrari F40. It was proving its pace, but could it last the distance? That was the question. Michel Ferte had already proved that the Venturi could win, and meanwhile, local man Enrico Petaggia, an instructor at the Vallelunga circuit, was taking his place in the Callaway Corvette, third on the grid. Christophe Bouchou had changed colour scheme, but was fourth position on the grid for the start of this Vallelunga race. And so to the start of the race, with Olafsson trying to make that Ferrari last all the way through to the end this time. Michel Ferte slotting into second place in the blue Venturi, and Franz Conrad making an excellent start in his Porsche to move up into third position. Bouchou down to fourth, Petaggia in fifth, and Tropener in sixth position. Ray Belm and Harry Nuttall had qualified back on the 8th. Worried them too much, they would soon be working their way up through the order. This time not with Charles Rickett, who'd joined them for the last race at Montlhéry. And meanwhile there were problems further down the field for Irmgard, spinning but managing to be avoided by the rest of the field. Battle for third place was soon beginning to get very close indeed. Franz Conrad trying to hold off Christophe Bouchou, the 27-year-old man who'd won both the French Formula 3 Championship and the Peugeot Spider Championship, but has never quite managed to make his way in single-seater racing. Nevertheless, now enjoying a very good career in sports car racing. Well, Bouchou was soon to come into the pits, and it was evident that there had been some contact between him and Franz Conrad in that battle for third place. Conrad also showing signs of damage on the front left corner of the Porsche. Anders Olafsson, meanwhile, was busy lapping back markers and hoping that the Ferrari F40 would hold together this time. So far, it was looking good, as the Ferrari on its home circuit in the GT Series, the only visit to Italy throughout the year, perhaps this was going to be the chance for the team to really get the result that they've been looking for. Meanwhile, once again, Belm and Nuttall were moving their way up through the field. Kaufmann in the number 50 Porsche notwithstanding, locking up his brakes on the way in. Suddenly smoke appearing from somewhere around the circuit. It proved to be smoke from a Venturi, and it was Michel Neugarten walking away from a car that had gone up in flames. Race leader now, Luciano Della Noce, now driving the car. The man teamed up with Anders Olafsson in the Ferrari F40, and it had performed faultlessly this time, coming through to take the victory.
It was fantastic for us. The car was working so well, and we didn't have any problem at all during the race.
Ferrari at last getting their first win in the BPR series. Second place to Petaggia and Fuchs, and a third position to Belm and Nuttall. Next round of the championship to Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, the classic circuit, that fabulous venue for the next race of the series. Again held over 4 hours, and we go on board with Franz Conrad on the first lap of the race in third position, chasing after Anders Olafsson, and up ahead is the blue Venturi once again of Michel Ferte. Well, this is the car that was completely rebuilt after the fire in Vallelunga. A superb effort from the Venturi team, managing to turn it round and putting it into race-winning performance once again. Olafsson, however, determined to try and take his second win, proving that they could cure the Ferrari reliability problems at Vallelunga. He was now chasing Michel Ferte for all he was worth. On board with Ferte. Franz Conrad was still holding on to third position. The very experienced Austrian, been racing since the late 70s, world sports cars in the late 80s, and now very much involved in the GT series. Meanwhile, the Callaway Corvette of Boris Seid and Helmut Ries was also well up in the overall order. But everybody was watching the battle between the Venturi and the Ferrari up front to see who would take the advantage here at Spa. Pace cars were brought out with a car off at Eau Rouge, the Nielsen Porsche 968, and a visitor to the gravel. The pace cars coming out and closing up the battle for the lead once again. In fact, at Spa, they were using two pace cars because of the length of the circuit, and later on in the race, that would go to cause a bit of a problem. At this point, Anders Olofsson had the lead over Michel Ferte, but it wasn't going to take long before Ferte would come through ahead of Olofsson once again. Suddenly Ferte taking the Venturi ahead of the Ferrari as the Ferrari suffered with too soft a tyre compound. But just as it looked as though the Ferrari was going to catch up to the Venturi towards the end of the race, the pace car came out again. The two leaders were split apart, and there was no chance for Olofsson to mount a final challenge in the dying moments of the race. And so it was the Venturi of Michel Ferte and Michel Neugarten coming through to take victory, their second win of the season, and just the result they wanted after that dramatic fire at Vallelunga. Celebrations once again for Ferte and Neugarten, who won from Olofsson and Della Noce, with Bouchou and Gurria in third. On to the next round of the series and the visit to Japan. And on pole position, a Group C car, the last ever outing for a Group C car, the Toyota. On pole by 6 seconds, in fact, from the Ferrari F40, now changing its colours, of Anders Olofsson. But the number 40 car still going for the GT honours. Back into the GT series, the number 86 car, the Labra competition Porsche, that had taken those two first victories of the year. And the Honda NSXs represented left and right here in Japan. We go on board with Jean-Pierre Jarier in the number 86 Labra competition Porsche, the car that had won at Paul Ricard to start the year off, and then had gone on to win at Harama as well. Well, the three drivers that had taken second place at the Daytona 24 Hours earlier in the year, Jarier, Wallach and Pareja, all joined up once together in this car and trying to put behind the fact that Venturi and Ferrari had been taking the successes while they'd been absent for one or two races. A big variety of cars in Japan, and obviously it wasn't long before the Group C Toyota took a very healthy lead indeed, opening up a lead of over a lap. But then suddenly, with just about half distance completed, Mauro Martini, the driver of the number 1 car, was off into the gravel trap. He'd already hit a barrier by that point in avoiding a back marker, and although they tried to get the car out, it was the end of it for the Toyota. That wasn't the only drama, however, as the lead went to the number 86 Porsche of Wallach, Pareja and Jarier as well. Suddenly this big accident for the Honda NSX caused the red flag to come out. The cars were regrouped on the grid for Parc Fermé, but one car gaining out of that was the Mazda number 74, driven by Frank Freyon amongst others. Well, they gained almost a lap on everybody else, but Frank Freyon then went off into the gravel and threw away the advantage that he'd gained. It was all leading to a bit of controversy amongst the European teams, who seemed to feel that everything was going in favour of the Japanese at this point. But in fact, it was going to be a win for a European team. That number 86 car, once again, of Jarier, Wallach and Pereira, was coming through in the closing stages of the 1,000-kilometre race at Suzuka to take yet another well-earned victory. The final pit stop, the last worrying moments for the team, but the Porsche was to run faultlessly right through into the finish at night. Porsche chalking up another win and delight in the Labra competition camp. 24 finishers out of the 44 that started the race at Suzuka. And Porsche once again coming out on top over Ferrari and Venturi. Honda NSX though in second place, promising more for 1995, and perhaps we'll see more of the Hondas in next year's or this year's GT Series. Well, the final race of the year held at the Zhuhai circuit in China. First ever FIA-sanctioned international motor race in China on the bumpy street circuit, 4.1 kilometers long and lined all the way around by concrete walls. On board with Philippe Alliot, man who raced for McLaren during the 1994 season, but taking part in his first sports car race since Le Mans 1993. The start of the race, and Bob Wollek leading from pole position on board with Philippe Alliot in fourth place behind Boris Said in the Corvette in second and Christophe Bouchou in the Venturi in third. Said's performance to qualify on the front row in the Callaway Corvette had been an excellent one, but he was to throw it all away on the opening lap. This contact with the wall on the outside was enough to damage the right rear bodywork and to puncture that tyre as well, and it wasn't long before the Corvette was a pit visitor on the end of this very opening lap of the race. Big disappointment for the Callaway team, who really had performed tremendously well to put the car on the front row of the grid. This car not as powerful and heavier than many of the other GT1 category cars, and so they really had hoped that they may be able to spring a surprise here in Zhuhai. Well, the number 86 Porsche was leading once again. What a surprise. But again, they were under attack and under pressure from the assembled ranks of Venturis and Ferraris. Philippe Alliot working his way up through the order. Well, the Corvette did manage to fight its way up, and also impressive was Stefan Rattel, the man from Venturi himself, who started at the back of the grid and got up to 6th place. But this rather nasty accident against the wall put him out, and Philippe Alliot was another one soon out of the race as well. Well, Jacques Lafitte had been drafted into the number 86 Porsche this time, and he showed what it was like to drive it round this bumpy circuit. Well, the Callaway Corvette had got up into second place in a remarkable recovery drive, but unfortunately it was all to no avail, with transmission failure ending their challenge. And so the win to Wollek, Lafitte and Jarier, their fourth win of the season, and another dominant performance. By the way, the 1995 season's already started, and the Daytona 24 Hours yesterday was a victory for the Porsche Spider of Jürgen Lassik, Christophe Bouchou, Giovanni Lavaggi and Marco Werner, and the Ferrari 333s didn't last the distance. We'll be back in just a moment here on Eurosport.